positive in Teddy's play, and we're getting wins, and that's all that matters. But he still drastically needs to improve for us to be any kind of championship contender ever while he's here as a quarterback. And like I said, now from last week to this next week, it definitely appears to me that accuracy is his number one issue. All right, let's see, what do we have for other negatives on the offensive side? Tight ends fairly, non-impactful again this week, which is odd considering the perceived talent that we have at that position, as well as the history that our offensive coordinator and play caller Norv Turner has in utilizing tight end involvement in his offenses. So that's a little bit confusing and concerning and disappointing. But it's not affecting the win-loss column, so whatever. Wide receiver play beyond Diggs, is average, acceptable, but nothing spectacular. Offensive line play is up and down, hit and miss, still primarily weak at the guards. It's always Fusco. If there's ever an offensive play that doesn't work and you're like, geez, what happened? It was Fusco. Like, you don't even need to rewind it. You don't need to wait for the commentator to break it down and get it wrong 50% of the time or more. Just trust me, there's a 99% chance it was Fusco. The guard play has been atrocious. Harris at right guard has been getting a little better throughout the course of the season. Fusco has not been getting any better at all at his newfound left guard position. And that is something that is going to need to be addressed at some point in time for the Vikings. Maybe not necessarily this season, but certainly, if not during the course of this season, in the off season, for sure. And the final negative on the offense side would be Norv Turner's play calling. Not that it was terrible. It wasn't a terribly called game by Norv, but it definitely wasn't one of his better, more impressive games that we've seen him call even this year, let alone the many that we've seen throughout his career in the NFL as a play caller. And then on defense, there are basically two negatives that I just wanted to mention and focus on. And then we'll preview the upcoming game quick for the Vikings and go league-wide. But the pass rush this last week in Chicago against the Bears was very lackluster. We didn't really get to Cutler a ton, even pressuring him, hitting him, hurrying him, let alone getting sacks. I want to say we only had one big fat sack in last week's game against the Bears, and that's uncommon both for us as a defense and for the Bears as an offense. So what happened? Something changed. That doesn't add up. I think the absence of Sharif Floyd at defensive tackle is the primary explanation for that. The sacks that we've been getting this year on defense outside of Sharif's that he creates have primarily been due to disguising different blitz packages and confusing the offense, allowing guys to go unblocked and have a free run at the quarterback. It's not necessarily anyone winning any sort of individual matchup or beating their guy at the line of scrimmage. However, that is exactly the kind of pass rush and penetration he said penetration that we have grown accustomed to getting from the Sheriff, Sharif Floyd. That guy is one of the top 5 pass rushing defensive tackles in all of football, period. Everybody in Minnesota especially, maybe league-wide or nationwide, I'm not sure, but everybody in Minnesota at least here just wants to praise Linval Joseph. He's the great defensive tackle. And Linval is a great defensive tackle, but he's the Pat Williams of the group, okay? Linval Joseph and Sharif Floyd are very similar to Pat Williams and Kevin Williams, which Vikings fans should very easily remember. Pat Williams was the big, block-eating run stopper that could occasionally get in the backfield on a pass play. That's Linval Joseph, okay? The better of those two in each situation, Kevin Williams the first time, Sharif Floyd now, the all-around guy that makes plays in the run for you too, but has the unique and highly coveted ability as a defensive tackle to create pass rush up the middle in the A-gap just on his own, man-to-man, not requiring any scheming. It's a very rare thing to find in the NFL. Warren Sapp had it. Like I said, Kevin Williams had it. John Randall had it. Although John Randall was not very good against the run. He was less complete. Sharif Floyd has that. And so I think with Sharif playing and healthy, we would have had at least 3 or 4 or 5 sacks in last week's game. But without him, the Bears appeared to be able to study film and be disciplined and educated and understand the Vikings' schemes, pass rushing schemes from a blitzing and a disguising standpoint, and they were able to correctly identify who was supposed to block who fairly well, and then those guys didn't win their individual matchups because that's not what they do. The only guy we have playing right now that is a win your individual man-to-man matchup pass rushing type of guy is Everson Griffin, and he can be inconsistent in those regards. When he's on fire, he's as good as it gets in the league, but he does have ups and downs. He'll have some really good weeks, and then he'll have a bad week or two. That's just been the way he's always been in his career. But so that lack of pass rush without Sharif Floyd was somewhat concerning. And please get healthy and come back as soon as possible, Sheriff. You're my man. The other thing would be the secondary, primarily Xavier Rhodes, continuing to get penalized. I listened to the most insane nonsense on the Vikings postgame on KFan after the game from Ben Lieber and whoever the heck else the host is. It's probably Meat Sauce or Wabi, I don't know, something like that. But they were discussing their, and this is I quote, their genuine concern over the regression of Xavier Rhodes. And I just about freaking lost it. It was like almost a scene out of a cartoon where, there's flames shooting out of my head, and I was in my car, and then there's a big hole in my car that's shooting through the roof of it. I could not believe the nonsense that I was hearing. Do not think for a second that Xavier Rhodes is not one of the 5 to 10 best corners in all of football right now. He is. If he wasn't, they wouldn't be penalizing him. They said, they used the word regression. Are we talking about a guy who's getting burnt by the wide receivers he's covering, who's getting beat? No, we're not. We're talking about a guy who's missing tackles? Nope. Are we talking about a guy who's out of position, making mental errors, continually? Nope. Are we talking about a guy who's got some sort of bad attitude, work ethic, anything like that? Nope. What the heck are you talking? You're talking about one specific little minor thing. Xavier Rhodes has drawn the most penalties of anyone in the NFL, any defensive back in the NFL this year. He's drawn those penalties for covering the wide receivers too closely. You're trying to tell me that a guy who's getting penalized for covering people too closely has regressed and that it's a genuine concern? He's gotten better. He's all over these guys in coverage. He has not allowed a single multiple touchdown performance on him at any game this year. Look at the numbers of every receiver that he's covered this season. Look at their numbers when he's covering them. He's got phenomenal defensive statistics of what he's held the people he's covering to this year. He's simply getting flagged for covering the guy super close. And the reason he's drawing the flag, it's not on him. It's a coaching thing. Our entire secondary does it. It's why our entire defensive back, cornerback group does it. And that is why all of our interceptions are from safeties and linebackers. Because safeties and linebackers are facing the ball and the quarterback. They have their eyes to the ball. That's why they're the ones getting the interceptions on this team. The reason the corners are not is not because they're not in position and coverage to get an interception. I've seen somewhere between 10 and 25 passes this year that could have been an interception had our cornerback, whoever that was, whether it be Newman or Munnerlin or Waynes or, in this example, in this topic, Xavier Rhodes, had they simply turned their head around and located the ball in the air. Every single one of them does it on every play in coverage. So it's not an individual thing. It's a coaching thing. They're being coached to run with the receiver, keep their eye on the receiver no matter what, and then when you think the ball is getting close, put your arm in between his arms and try and get in the middle of it and break it up so that it's an incompletion. It can be very effective, but there's plenty of flaws with it. It eliminates your interceptions, first and foremost. You can't get interceptions that way. So you've got a lot of opportunities to create turnovers that are going without getting taken advantage of. Secondly, and this is the primary issue here right now, is you're going to draw a lot of penalties. Because if you don't have your head turned around, your eyes on the ball, then you're not considered as going for the ball. And if you're not considered as going for the ball, making a receiving attempt, then any contact you make with someone who is, whether it be incidental, unimpactful, anything, any kind of contact is pass interference. So all Xavier Rhodes has to do, and the other corners on the Vikes included, all he's got to do is when he thinks that ball's getting close or in the air, turn your damn head around. And then any contact that is made, incidental or not, maybe, wink wink, can be perceived under the rules as you're making an attempt to catch the ball. You have every right, you have as much right to the ball as the offensive receiver does. And then boom, problem solved. No more penalties, you're getting more interceptions, and Xavier Rhodes goes from regressing, concerned regression, to being an unquestioned Pro Bowler and a guy that all the people on the radio shows and the TV shows are discussing as one of the top 5 cover corners in all of football. So that's all it is. Zim, fix it. It's really easy. It's really easy. But that's all that is. Those are the only 2 negatives I took from the defense. Was the lack of pass rush, and then those penalties and the comments here in Vikings Nation afterwards. I do want to point out one play that I remember from late in the game where Xavier Rhodes was in coverage deep downfield, blanketing the receiver beautifully, and for once he actually got his head turned around and was making an effort on the ball, got pulled down slyly by the offensive player. Crowd was booing. Announcers were expecting a pass interference call on Xavier Rhodes. I was expecting and I was hoping for an offensive pass interference. Refs kept their flags in the pockets and did not call the penalty, and everybody in the stadium was shocked because that's just what we do in these situations this year. It's like we just assume, being uneducated football fans, that, we've seen plays look like this all year and Rhodes gets the flag all the time, so that must have been a penalty. Well, it wasn't. And they were right in not throwing it because he got turned around. He was making a play on the ball, and he has equal right to it, same as the offensive player. So it was great to see that he is actually capable of doing that, and now I would just like to see him